January 26, 1945. Eastern France. Near the frozen village of Holtzwihr. The forest was quiet, but not peaceful. Snow clung to bare branches like ash after a fire. The ground was hard, frozen, and scarred by shell craters that had never been filled. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled low and steady, like thunder refusing to fade. Audie Murphy stood near the tree line, his breath visible in the cold air. He was only 20 years old, small-framed, sunken cheeks, eyes that looked older than they should have. To anyone passing by, he didn't look like a man who could stop an army. He looked like someone who might disappear into the snow if the wind picked up. But the men behind him knew better. Murphy was a company commander now. Battlefield promotion. The officers above him were gone. Dead, wounded, evacuated. Leadership had thinned like blood in melting snow. And somehow, it had fallen to him. Ahead of their position lay an open field, white and deceptively calm. Beyond it, the dark tree line where German forces had been gathering unseen. Murphy raised his binoculars. Nothing moved. That was the problem. He had learned this lesson the hard way. When the Germans went silent, they were already coming. Behind him, the remnants of his company crouched low. Barely 24 men remained. Exhausted, half-frozen, many wounded, ammunition running thin. They had been fighting for days without rest. Murphy turned to them and spoke quietly. "Hold tight. Stay low." His voice was calm, almost gentle, but his mind was racing. Intelligence reports had warned of a counterattack. German infantry, supported by armor. Their objective was simple: smash through this thin American line and retake the village. If they broke here, the entire flank would collapse. There would be no retreat, only death or surrender. Murphy hated both options. A few yards behind him sat an M10 tank destroyer, dug in along the forest edge. Its thin armor was no match for German tanks, but its .50 caliber machine gun could tear infantry apart. For now, it was silent. Murphy glanced back at it, then forward again. The wind shifted, and then, movement, a flicker at the far edge of the woods. Murphy stiffened. Through the binoculars, shapes began to form. Dark figures slipping between trees. Rifles, helmets, white camouflage smocks blending into the snow. German infantry. Not dozens, hundreds. Murphy lowered the binoculars slowly. His stomach tightened. Not with fear, but calculation. Too many. He signaled to his men. Enemy forming up. Get ready. The Americans checked weapons with numb fingers. Bolts slid back. Magazines were tapped into place. Someone whispered a prayer. Then the forest erupted. Machine guns opened up from the German side, ripping across the field. Snow exploded into white clouds as bullets chewed into the ground. Mortar rounds followed, whistling down before detonating with bone-shaking force. The first American was hit before he could even fire. Murphy dropped to one knee and returned fire, his rifle barking in sharp, controlled bursts. He wasn't shooting to kill yet. He was measuring. Distance, speed, intent. The Germans advanced in waves, using fire and movement, textbook precision. They weren't rushing. They were pressing. Murphy knew what that meant. They were confident. A mortar round slammed nearby, throwing dirt and ice into the air. Murphy felt the concussion punch his chest. Another exploded closer. A third. Shrapnel tore into his leg. Pain flared, hot sudden. He stumbled but didn't fall. Blood soaked into his boot, instantly dark against the snow. A medic shouted for him to fall back. Murphy ignored him. He crawled forward instead. The tank destroyer's engine roared to life behind him, its machine gun opening up, shredding the advancing Germans. For a moment, the attack slowed. For a moment it worked. Then the Germans answered. Anti-tank fire slammed into the M10. The first hit rocked it violently. The second set it ablaze. Flames climbed up the thin armor, black smoke pouring into the sky. The crew bailed out, scrambling for cover as ammunition inside began to cook off. Murphy watched it burn. He understood the truth instantly. Without that gun, we're finished. He turned to his men. Fall back to the woods, he ordered. I'll cover you. They stared at him, stunned. You're hit, one of them said. Murphy nodded. Move. Now. Reluctantly, the men pulled back, disappearing into the trees one by one. Murphy stayed behind, firing methodically, buying seconds. Then minutes. His rifle clicked empty. He dropped it. The Germans were closer now. Too close. Their shouts carried clearly across the field. Boots crunching through snow. Weapons firing non-stop. Murphy's leg burned with every movement. He was alone. Then he looked at the burning tank destroyer again. Flames roared. Smoke blinded the sky. The .50 caliber machine gun sat exposed on top, unmanned, surrounded by fire and exploding ammunition. Any sane man would stay away. Murphy did not hesitate. He ran toward it. Bullets snapped past him, tearing through the air where he had been a second before. He reached the tank destroyer, grabbed the machine gun, and hauled himself up, his wounded leg screaming in protest. He climbed onto the burning vehicle. Fire licked at his boots. The radio inside crackled to life. Murphy grabbed the microphone. Artillery, he said calmly. Drop it on my position. Silence on the other end. Then a stunned voice. Repeat that. Murphy looked out over the field, at the advancing German infantry, now less than 100 yards away. Drop it on me, he said again. And as the first artillery rounds began to scream overhead, Audie Murphy squeezed the trigger of the machine gun and turned the burning wreck beneath him into a fortress of fire. But the Germans weren't done coming. The machine gun came alive in Murphy's hands. The recoil slammed into his shoulders like a hammer, steady and relentless. Brass casings poured down around him, bouncing off the burning metal, hissing as they vanished into the snow. The sound was deafening, louder than the artillery, louder than the screams. The .50 caliber tore into the German line. Men fell, then more. White camouflage turned dark as bodies dropped into the open field. The advance faltered, not stopped but shaken. German soldiers threw themselves flat, clawing at the frozen earth for cover that didn't exist. Murphy didn't let up. He swept the gun slowly, deliberately, cutting lanes through the attackers. Every burst was controlled, every pause calculated. He fired like a man who knew this was not about rage, but time. Seconds mattered. Minutes meant survival. Behind him, the tank destroyer groaned as flames spread. Ammunition inside began to detonate with sharp, cracking pops. Each explosion jolted the vehicle beneath him, threatening to throw him off. Fire crept closer. The heat was unbearable. Murphy's coat smoldered, the smell of burning oil mixed with cordite and blood. His wounded leg throbbed in rhythm with the gunfire, each pulse a reminder that he was already hurt, already bleeding out. He ignored it. Below him, German officers shouted orders. Murphy could hear the urgency now, the confusion. They had expected a retreat, not a single American standing his ground on a burning wreck. They changed tactics. Machine guns opened up, raking the tank destroyer. Bullets sparked off metal inches from Murphy's face. One round tore through his helmet strap. Another punched into the machine gun mount. Murphy leaned closer to the gun, making himself smaller. He kept firing. Artillery shells screamed overhead. Then the first American round hit. The earth behind the Germans erupted, throwing bodies into the air like rag dolls. A second shell landed closer. A third. Murphy had called the fire himself. Danger close. So close that fragments whistled past him, slicing through smoke and flame. The radio crackled again. "Adjust fire," Murphy shouted, his voice hoarse. 50 yards forward. Same line. He could barely hear the reply. The Germans were regrouping. Murphy saw them spreading out, trying to flank him. Smart. Disciplined. They crawled through shell holes, using their dead as cover. He shifted the gun and opened up again. More fell. Some crawled back. Some didn't move at all. Time blurred. Minutes stretched into something shapeless. Murphy's arms ached. His hands were numb from cold and vibration. The machine gun barrel glowed faintly through the smoke. The tank destroyer shuddered again, this time harder. A blast inside blew a panel loose. Flames surged upward, wrapping around the machine gun position. Murphy felt his trousers catch fire. He slapped at them with one hand while firing with the other. He was burning, and still he didn't climb down. Somewhere in the trees behind him, his men watched in disbelief. They could see the flames, hear the gun, hear the artillery. They thought he was dead. The Germans thought he was insane. Murphy was neither. He was focused. He noticed details most men would miss. An officer trying to rally troops, a machine gun team setting up behind a fallen log, a cluster of helmets signaling another push. He dealt with each in turn. Short burst. Pause. Shift. Fire again. The field became a graveyard. Then something new appeared at the edge of the smoke. A tank. German armor rolled forward cautiously, its engine growling low. Its gun traversed, searching for the source of the fire that had halted the advance. Murphy felt a cold knot form in his chest. The .50 caliber could kill infantry, but not that. The tank fired. The shell screamed past him and exploded in the woods behind, shredding trees and sending splinters flying like knives. American soldiers dove for cover. Murphy swung the machine gun back to the infantry escorting the tank, ripping them apart, forcing the armor to advance alone. The tank hesitated. Then another artillery round slammed down near it, rocking it violently. Murphy grabbed the radio again. "Bring it in closer," he barked. "Right on the armor." There was a pause. "You'll be hit," came the reply. Murphy looked down at the flames licking around his boots, at the smoke choking his lungs, at the Germans still pushing forward despite the bodies. "I know," he said. The tank fired again. This time the blast knocked Murphy sideways. He nearly fell, but clung to the gun, dragging himself back into position as shrapnel tore into his already wounded leg. Pain exploded through him. White-hot, blinding, he screamed, but the scream was swallowed by gunfire. The tank destroyer rocked violently as another internal explosion went off. The machine gun jammed for a terrifying second. Murphy slammed the charging handle hard. It cleared. He fired again. Artillery rained down now, pounding the German attack from above and below. The field vanished in smoke and fire. Men ran. Others crawled. Some simply lay still. The German tank finally reversed, backing away under the barrage. The infantry followed, slowly, reluctantly. The attack was breaking. Murphy kept firing until the last shapes disappeared into the trees. Then, silence. The gun clicked empty. Murphy let go. For the first time in nearly an hour, his hands stopped shaking the world. He slid down off the burning tank destroyer and collapsed into the snow. The fire roared behind him. The cold rushed in. His vision tunneled. As medics ran toward him, Murphy looked up at the gray sky and wondered, briefly, if this was where it ended. He didn't know yet that the field before him held more than 50 enemy dead. He didn't know his stand would echo far beyond this frozen forest. All he knew was that the Germans might come back. And if they did, he would stand again. Audie Murphy drifted in and out of consciousness. Cold pressed into his bones as he lay half-buried in the snow. Smoke rolled overhead in thick, choking waves, blotting out the sky. Somewhere close, flames still roared. Hungry, impatient. Hands grabbed his shoulders. "Lieutenant, stay with me." Murphy tried to answer, but his mouth wouldn't form the words. His leg felt like it didn't exist anymore, just a distant, burning echo. Blood soaked through his trousers, freezing almost as soon as it hit the air. The medics worked fast. Too fast. That worried him. Enemy pulling back. Someone shouted from the treeline. Murphy's eyes snapped open. Pulling back wasn't the same as gone. He forced himself upright, ignoring the pain that screamed through his body. The medics tried to hold him down. "No," Murphy rasped. "Not yet." He dragged himself toward his rifle, fingers numb, clumsy. The battlefield was quieter now, but not safe. Smoke concealed everything. Silence was never empty. It was waiting. He scanned the field. Bodies lay scattered across the snow. Some American, most German. Helmets abandoned. Weapons frozen where they fell. The open ground that had looked so peaceful earlier now resembled a slaughterhouse. Murphy swallowed hard. He had done this. And still, it wasn't over. From the forest edge came movement. Slow, careful. German scouts. Testing the line. Murphy raised his rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the haze. One figure dropped instantly. The others vanished back into the trees. The message was clear. "I'm still here." Behind him, his men began returning to the forward positions. They stared at Murphy as if they were seeing a ghost, blackened by smoke, bloodied, barely standing. "You should be dead," one of them whispered. Murphy didn't answer. He was listening. Far off, engines rumbled again. Not retreat this time. Reorganization. The Germans were stubborn, experienced. They had taken losses before. They knew how to absorb pain and keep coming. Murphy knew what came next. A second push. Stronger, smarter, angrier. He limped to the edge of the woods and took cover behind a shattered tree trunk. Every step sent knives of pain up his spine, but he refused help. Leaders didn't lean on others. Not when the line was this thin. He checked his ammunition. Not enough. Never enough. He redistributed what he could, giving rounds to men whose hands still shook. He spoke quietly, steadily, as if this were just another drill back home. "Wait for them," he said. "Don't rush your shots." They nodded. They trusted him completely now. Minutes passed. Then the mortars returned. Rounds slammed into the forest, snapping trees and spraying splinters like shrapnel. Men ducked. Someone screamed. Another went silent. Murphy clenched his jaw. The Germans advanced again, this time wider, using the trees, probing for weak points. Machine guns hammered from multiple angles, pinning the Americans down. Murphy crawled forward. Alone. He popped up just long enough to fire, then vanished again, shifting positions constantly. To the Germans, it felt like there were dozens of defenders. In reality, it was one man refusing to stay still. A German grenade landed nearby. Murphy grabbed it and threw it back. The explosion tore through the underbrush, cutting down two attackers. Shouts followed. Fear this time. Confusion. Good. Murphy pressed harder. He charged forward suddenly, yelling at the top of his lungs, firing from the hip. The audacity of it stunned the Germans. They hesitated, just long enough. American rifles opened up behind him. The line held. Again, Murphy dropped to one knee, gasping for breath. His vision blurred at the edges. Blood loss was catching up. His hands trembled uncontrollably now. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. And the Germans knew it too. From the trees came a deep, mechanical sound. Another tank. Closer than before. Murphy looked toward the sound, his face tightening. No tank destroyer left. No heavy weapons. No artillery left to call. Just rifles. And a wounded man who had already given everything. The tank's silhouette emerged through the smoke, its gun sweeping toward the American positions. Murphy rose slowly. He wiped blood from his eyes and stepped forward to meet it. Because retreat was no longer an option, the tank loomed closer. Its tracks chewed through frozen earth, crushing branches, bones, and anything else in its path. The engine's growl drowned out everything, gunfire, shouting, even fear. It was the sound of inevitability. Murphy stood in its path, not because he was fearless, but because there was nowhere left to go. He dropped to the ground as the tank's machine gun spat fire, bullets ripping through the tree trunk behind him. Bark exploded. Splinters sliced into his face and hands. He crawled, dragging his useless leg, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through his ribs. Think. His mind raced, not with panic, but with survival math. No bazooka, no mines, no armor, just grenades. Murphy reached into his jacket and felt cold metal. 2 grenades left. Maybe 3, if one hadn't been damaged by the heat earlier. He didn't check. There wasn't time. The tank slowed. Its commander leaned out slightly, scanning for targets. Infantry followed behind it now, emboldened, using the steel giant as moving cover. Murphy pulled the pin. He waited. Closer. Then he threw. The grenade bounced once, twice, then vanished under the tank's chassis. The explosion rocked the ground, but the tank kept coming. Murphy cursed under his breath. The second grenade flew a heartbeat later, exploding against the infantry behind the tank. Men screamed. The formation staggered, but didn't break. The tank's main gun fired. The blast threw Murphy backward, slamming him hard into the snow. His ears rang. The world tilted violently. For a moment, he couldn't see anything at all. Blackness closed in. Not yet. He forced his eyes open. The tank had overshot slightly. Its gun was turning back toward him, slow but relentless. The infantry regrouped, spreading out, raising their rifles. Murphy tried to stand. His leg buckled. He fell. A German voice shouted, "Close now." Too close. Murphy rolled onto his back and fired upward, emptying his magazine into a shape moving through the smoke. The body collapsed on top of him, heavy and warm, blood soaking into Murphy's uniform. He shoved it off, reloaded with shaking hands. The Americans behind him opened fire again, desperately trying to hold the line. But Murphy could hear it in the rhythm of their shots. They were running low. So was he. The tank stopped. Its engine idled. Murphy realized what was happening a split second before the hatch opened. The commander was getting out. To finish it personally. Murphy didn't hesitate. He fired. The commander fell backward, disappearing into the hatch. The tank's machine gun roared in response, spraying wildly. Bullets tore through the snow inches from Murphy's head. He crawled again. Every movement sent lightning through his wounded leg. His vision blurred. His mouth tasted like iron. He had lost too much blood. He knew that much. And still, he moved forward. Because if he stopped, everything stopped. He reached another shell crater and rolled into it just as the tank fired again. The blast collapsed part of the crater wall, burying Murphy in dirt and ice. For a terrifying moment, he couldn't breathe. He clawed his way out, gasping, coughing, spitting mud. The infantry was nearly on him now. He stood, not fully, not straight, but enough. Murphy raised his rifle and charged again, shouting. Not words, just raw defiance. The Germans froze, stunned by the sight of a bloodied American officer still advancing after everything they had thrown at him. Murphy fired until the rifle clicked empty. Then he used it like a club. A German lunged at him. Murphy swung, connecting with the man's helmet. Another grabbed his arm. Murphy drove a knee into the man's chest and shoved him away. The world narrowed to motion and pain and breath. Somehow, the Germans began to pull back again. Not because they had orders, because they had had enough. The tank reversed, slowly at first, then faster, retreating into the smoke. Infantry followed, dragging wounded, abandoning the dead. The firing faded. The forest went still. Murphy collapsed to his knees, then onto his side. Snow pressed against his cheek. The cold felt almost comforting now, numbing the pain. Above him, the sky had cleared slightly, a pale gray, indifferent to everything below. Boots crunched nearby. American boots. Hands lifted him gently this time. "You're done," a medic said, voice breaking. "You've done enough." Murphy tried to answer. He couldn't. His eyes fluttered shut. As they carried him away from the line, he had refused to surrender. Behind him, the Germans did not return. Not that day. Not to Holtzwihr. But as Murphy slipped into darkness, he had no idea what this moment would become. No idea that this frozen field would define his life forever. And no idea that the war, his war, was still not finished. Audie Murphy woke to the sound of gunfire. Not loud, not close, distant, which meant only one thing. The battle wasn't over. He lay on a stretcher near the edge of the forest, a morphine haze dulling the sharpest edges of pain, but not enough to silence his instincts. His leg was wrapped tight, blood seeping through the bandages. His hands trembled uncontrollably now. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. A medic leaned over him. "Easy, Lieutenant. You're out of it." Murphy grabbed the man's sleeve with surprising strength. "They coming back?" he asked. The medic hesitated. That was answer enough. Murphy pushed himself upright, ignoring the protests, ignoring the pain screaming through his body. Around him, wounded men lay groaning, some staring blankly into nothing. The smell of blood and antiseptic mixed with smoke hung thick in the air. From the front came the unmistakable sound of renewed contact. Rifles, machine guns, shouting. The Germans weren't retreating anymore. They were probing again. Slow, careful, like a predator testing whether the prey was finally dead. Murphy swung his legs off the stretcher and nearly blacked out as his injured leg hit the ground. A medic caught him. "You can't go back," the man said. "You've lost too much blood." Murphy shook his head. "If I don't," he said quietly, "they will." He took a rifle from a wounded soldier who could no longer hold it. Checked the chamber. Half a magazine. Enough. He limped back toward the line. Every step a battle of will over flesh. The forest felt different now, darker, heavier. Trees that had once provided cover were shredded, their trunks split and bleeding sap like open wounds. The Americans were stretched thin again. Too thin. Murphy dropped beside a foxhole, where two young soldiers fired nervously into the smoke. "Hold," he said. "Wait for shapes." They looked at him, eyes wide. "You're supposed to be gone," one whispered. Murphy managed a thin smile. Didn't take. The Germans emerged in small groups, shadows moving between trees, rifles snapping. Murphy fired carefully, every shot deliberate. A man fell, then another. But this time, the Germans didn't panic. They adapted. A machine gun opened up from the flank, pinning the Americans down. Mortar rounds followed, walking closer with each explosion. Murphy recognized the pattern instantly. They were softening the line, preparing one last push. He crawled forward alone, again, angling toward the machine gun. Bullets chewed the ground around him, throwing dirt into his face. He kept going, dragging his ruined leg behind him. He pulled his last grenade, held it, waited. The machine gun paused to reload. Murphy threw. The explosion ripped through the position, silencing it instantly. Shouts followed. Panic again, raw and human. Murphy fired into the confusion. Behind him, American rifles joined in. The Germans hesitated. That hesitation saved lives. Minutes passed, then more. The attacks came in bursts now, half-hearted, disorganized. The certainty was gone. The confidence shattered. Whatever spirit had driven them forward earlier had bled out onto the snow. Murphy felt it before he saw it. The fight was draining out of the enemy. A final mortar round landed far short. Then nothing. Silence returned. Real silence this time. The kind that settles slowly, cautiously, as if afraid to make a sound. Murphy stayed alert, rifle raised, waiting for the trick. It never came. German forces withdrew completely, fading back into the woods, leaving behind their dead, their weapons, their failed assault. The line held. For good. Murphy finally allowed himself to sit down. The adrenaline vanished all at once. Pain flooded in. He slumped against a tree, breath shallow, vision blurring again. Medics rushed him this time, lifting him gently, speaking urgently. As they carried him away, Murphy looked back at the field, at the smoke, at the bodies, at the ground he had refused to give up. He didn't feel pride. He felt empty. And deep down, he wondered something he would never say out loud. How many times can a man do this before it costs him everything? Because the battle was won. But the weight of it, that was only beginning to settle. Audie Murphy was carried from the battlefield. The snow underfoot was trampled and red, a stark reminder of what had happened just hours before. Smoke still rose from the burning tank destroyer, curling into the gray winter sky. The forest was eerily silent now, dead silence, punctuated only by distant artillery in the background. Murphy's body ached everywhere. His leg throbbed with every step. His hands shook uncontrollably. He tasted iron on his tongue, blood, his own or someone else's, he couldn't tell. Yet his mind was sharper than ever. Every sound, every movement, every shadow was recorded, etched into memory. The men who had survived followed in stunned silence. Some whispered his name. Some refused to speak at all. One young soldier, barely 17, looked at Murphy with eyes wide, as though seeing a god in human form. Murphy was exhausted, but pride didn't come. Only the hollow, heavy feeling of survival. He had killed over 50 enemy soldiers. He had held an entire German assault at bay, alone. And yet, he barely felt alive. He was taken to a field hospital, where doctors worked frantically to save him. Every movement caused waves of pain, but Murphy remained calm. His mind was elsewhere, back on the battlefield, watching the smoke curl around the bodies, counting the seconds it had taken to save his men. Word of his actions spread quickly. Fellow soldiers talked in hushed, reverent tones about the young man who had climbed a burning tank destroyer, firing relentlessly, refusing to back down even when outnumbered and wounded. Soon, commanding officers arrived. They examined the battlefield reports, corroborated eyewitness accounts, and spoke to the men who had survived. One officer shook his head in disbelief. "He did this alone?" he asked quietly. "Yes," came the reply. "He did it alone." Murphy, lying in his cot, simply nodded. He did not seek glory. He only wanted to survive, to see the men he had saved live another day. Yet, from that day forward, his name became legend. Audie Murphy would go on to become the most decorated American soldier of World War II. Medals, honors, and citations would follow him. Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Stars. Yet, None of it captured what it truly cost him. The weight of lives taken, the endless nights replaying the screams, the battlefield burned into memory forever. The war continued. Battles raged. Murphy fought again. He survived again. But the story of Holtzwihr, the single frozen field in France where one young man stood alone against an entire German assault, would be told for generations. It was not just a tale of heroism. It was a testament to courage, to defiance in the face of impossible odds. It was a reminder that sometimes one person can change the fate of many. And as Murphy drifted into sleep in the field hospital, the sounds of distant guns echoing faintly in the night, he did not know the full measure of the legend he had become. The battlefield was quiet now, but the world would remember. Because legends aren't born in calm. They are forged in fire, blood, and impossible choice.